Hey everyone, week 4 is going to introduce you to texts and scholarship in our discipline that look at how we can make assessment more equitable for diverse learners. You're going to read Arnitha Ball's book chapter about culture and race and the impact that those issues have on assessment and how we assess student writing. You're also going to read a book chapter from Asao Inouye's book about labor-based grading contracts. In the supplemental resources, I've also put a link to the 2019 address from Inouye to the Conference on College Composition and Communication. That conference is probably the marquee venue for sharing research in our discipline. It's definitely the marquee conference in our discipline. Inouye's address was super challenging to folks. I remember it was in Pittsburgh that year. Our field is overwhelmingly white, so it's mostly white folks that are in the room, and he takes a portion out of that address and he speaks directly to people of color in the room and talks about how a lot of white colleagues aren't necessarily all the allies that maybe they're cracked up to be or that they think that they are. It really flipped the script on how we think about race in the discipline, and it's something that folks talk about still. Particularly in these times where there's a lot of talk about like what we can do in the classrooms and even legislatures getting involved with what's allowed to be taught in the classroom. It was a really challenging speech and an important one, and you can check it out in the supplemental resources if you'd like. Historically, when composition scholars have thought about a student, like who a student is, and when they talk about students, they're assuming a monolithic understanding of a student, usually white and usually middle class. The reality, though, has changed over the years. Women make up a larger percentage of college students in the United States. I think here at Shawnee State, it's around 65-35 split. And college classrooms, like our society as a whole, is become more diverse. The readings by Ball and Inouye this week, they're asking, are the methods that we're using to assess student writing, are they sensitive? Are they acknowledging these changing landscapes in our college classrooms and in the writers that are coming to college now? Inouye is specifically asking, are the values that we bring to judging and evaluating student writing, are those informed by cultural and racial biases that we have, again, unconsciously? They're not making the case that faculty are going into the classroom to explicitly be racist, but they're saying that we often carry some baggage. Living in a society where racism is still an issue, we carry some of that baggage into the classroom. And we take that baggage and then we use it, seeps into how we evaluate and assess student writing. In the supplemental resources, I'll also link to a prepared presentation that I gave at the Conference on College Composition and Communication back in 2017. If you want to check that out, I think that you're going to see that I'm trying to think through how we might do anti-racist writing assessment work at institutions that are majority white. Shawnee State University, I think we're 85 to 90% white, and that's more diverse than our neighboring counties. Like our neighboring counties, like they're 95, 96% white folk living in those counties. I'm trying to figure out how do we develop assessment practices and policies that combat racism at a school where there's very little diversity. And if anything, I think that presentation is kind of a reminder that if you're only thinking about race in terms of anything other than white, I think we're missing a lot. I think that we're missing a lot of stuff there. So you can check that out in the supplemental resources. This week we'll also read about gender and neurodiversity and how they impact writing assessment. The field of writing studies, itself composition studies, has thought about like how gender impacts communication. There's a number of studies that have been done in that area, but there hasn't been much conversation about how that impacts how we evaluate and assess student writing. And the Haswell and Haswell piece will address that. Neurodiversity is a much more recent conversation in the discipline, and it's a fascinating area, tied also to disability studies and its impact in the discipline. And that's a fascinating article. I'm looking forward to rereading it and hearing your thoughts about it and the rest of the readings for this week. I just want to be clear about the readings that this week. They barely scratch the surface when it comes to the idea the topic of diversity and how it impacts how we think about assessment. There's tons of other scholars that I could point you to that are doing really cool work in this area. I chose what I think are the more important readings and some that I think are more accessible, although some of y'all are not going to like the Haswell and Haswell piece. It's a tougher to get through, and maybe the Ball piece as well. And we could read about this for an entire semester. So I don't want you to think that this encapsulates in any way the conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion when it comes to assessment. Just know that it has a rich tradition in the discipline, and it's probably the most dominant conversation, or it happens the most frequently. Like there's a lot of publications in this area, and it's an important area of scholarship in the field. Beginning week 5, we start to get much more logistic-minded, nuts and bolts, putting together learning outcomes, how to write a prompt, things like that. The first few weeks of the class, I want you to understand that there's theory behind it. There's some deep thinking behind how we assess and evaluate student writing. And beginning in week 5, we get into, all right, let's put some of that stuff into practice, and I'm going to give you some resources for developing learning outcomes, writing assignments, rubrics, and other assessment instruments that you might use. The readings over the last 4 weeks are going to help you make some choices and decisions with your final project, and you also need to refer to those readings and the readings this week for your reflection at the end of the term. And I'm super excited to see what y'all come up with, and I'm looking forward to learning from you in your reactions and your responses to the text for this week. That's it for now. If y'all have any questions, hope you reach out. Bye for now.